Welcome aboard the Bitcoin Express. My name is Chase. Let's get to it. In this video, we're going to go over what the Bitcoin CME Gap is and why I, along with many others, believe that it is a myth. CME stands for Chicago Mercantile Exchange. This is an exchange that trades all types of assets, not just Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. And in 2018, CME decided to list Bitcoin futures contracts. So this is a place where people can trade futures contracts that bet on the future price of Bitcoin. And just like any other regulated financial exchange, they have operating hours when they're actually working, similar to the stock exchange. The stock exchange is open from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. So with the CME, when it comes to Bitcoin futures, they are open 5 p.m. Sunday to 4 p.m. Friday, Central Standard Time, because they're located in Chicago. So because of this, there's an opening price and a closing price. So every Friday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, the CME market closes. So as it closes, there is a closing price. So let's say that at a Friday, Bitcoin at 4 p.m. is about $10,000. So this would be the closing price on CME. Now the problem is, Bitcoin itself never stops trading. Bitcoin on all the other exchanges is trading 24/7, 365 days a year. So as there's a closing price on the CME, Bitcoin continues to trade. So the price can differ from the closing price of the CME. Let's do an example. Let's say on this chart over here, Bitcoin has a closing price at about $10,000 on the CME, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Right over here where I'm hovering the mouse. This is where it closed. But then over the weekend on other exchanges, Bitcoin continues to trade and the price goes up, maybe to 11,000, then to 12,000. Then on 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sunday, when the markets open up again, the price of Bitcoin is at $12,000. This is where the gap is created. So on the CME chart, right around here where the mouse is, it closed at $10,000. And then when it opened up on Sunday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, the price was at $12,000. So here is the gap. Now the theory is that this gap needs to be filled for Bitcoin to move forward and then eventually reach its all-time high prices. So over here, we would need the price during CME trading hours to go back down to 10,000 to fill this gap. The gap is created on the weekend, so it can't be filled on the weekends. It needs to be filled once the CME market is open again. So if you look on this chart, here's the gap. And as we go through the days, we'll see it's not being filled. Actually, the price continues to go up. And then it's eventually over here, where you see the mouse is hovering, that the gap is filled. So here's the original gap, and then down the line, the gap is filled right over here. And this works the opposite way. If the price of Bitcoin closes at $10,000 and then over the weekend, Bitcoin trades down to $9,000, then $8,000, and then when the CME markets open, the price is at $8,000, there's a gap now. And for this gap to fill, the price of Bitcoin now needs to go up back to $10,000 to fill that gap. So right now, we're working with a gap in Bitcoin. And the theory is that it has to be filled. So over here on July 24th, look on the screen over here, Bitcoin closed at around 9,700. And then when the markets opened up again on the CME, it was trading at about $9,900. So this gap over here needs to be filled. But as we can see over the days, the gap was not filled. Instead, the price continued to climb higher. And then more recently, over this past week, we almost filled the gap, but not quite. We need to reach this 9,700 range to fill that gap before we can move forward. So the idea now is that Bitcoin eventually will go to $9,700 before we can ever make an all-time high. This is the theory, because 95% of the time, historically, Bitcoin gaps have been filled. 95 weekends out of 100 weekends. And this is where I get to the point where I'm going to state my opinion. It's a strong opinion that the Bitcoin CME gap is a huge myth. And I'm going to take it first from this tweet from Crypto Capital Venture, who states, "The Bitcoin CME gap is a technical analysis fad. It is not real. These gaps get filled because Bitcoin is volatile, not because it needed to happen. The gap does not have to be filled, but it does create great content and filler for crypto influencers." So what he's saying here, and what I'm saying as well, is that this gap does not have to be filled, and 95% of the time, it's not filled because of a certain rule, but it happens because Bitcoin is so volatile. Bitcoin can go up 1,000, up 2,000, or even down 1,000 or 2,000 all in a day, especially over days and weeks. It can go any direction. So let's say we're working at a price right now of Bitcoin at $10,200, and we need to hit $9,700 to fill this gap. It could happen at any moment. Not only can Bitcoin fill this gap and drop to $9,700, it could even go lower because that's the nature of Bitcoin. It's a volatile asset. So probability is that because it's volatile, sometime it will eventually fill this gap. Now, this is the second part. This is the part that really makes this a myth, a big 100% fable, story, fad, whatever you want to call it. There's no time limit for when this gap needs to be filled. It could be filled the day the market opens. It could be filled a week later. It could even be filled a month later. The study that showed that 95 out of 100 weekend gaps were filled, or 95% of them, showed that 50 closed on the opening day and 28 within the same week, meaning there were 17 gaps that were filled that took much longer than 1 week. It's similar to saying, it's going to rain, and then your friend says, well, when is it going to rain? Today, tomorrow, next week, in 2 months? And you answer, I don't know, it's going to rain. Well, obviously it's going to rain eventually. So with these gaps, we need to reach these levels. Either Bitcoin needs to decrease or increase at a certain point to fill this gap. But because Bitcoin is volatile, and because there is no time limit, eventually down the road, this gap can be filled. It doesn't always happen overnight. Look at this chart over here. In March 6th, Bitcoin closed at around $9,100, right? And then when it opened up on March 9th, it was about $8,300. So here's this gap. If you're looking on the screen, this is the gap. And as we can see, this gap was not filled. Sorry about this. Let me refresh the screen real quickly. I didn't pay for the premium version, so I'm having this issue over here. Just be patient with me just for a minute. Okay, so we're back here on this gap, right? So as we can see, this gap over here, it wasn't filled. Days went by, weeks went by. Eventually, it was filled over here, April 29th. So almost 2 months later, it was filled. Of course, volatile asset, there's no time limit. Eventually, it will be filled. But not all gaps are filled. Like I said, 95% of the time they're filled, but it doesn't have to happen. There still is a gap at 3,500 from earlier this year, meaning, according to this theory, that for Bitcoin to stabilize, for Bitcoin to one day reach all-time highs and whatever it is, reach that price of $100,000 or more, we need to hit this gap of $3,500, even if it is for a brief moment. But maybe we're past this stage. This gap, this myth, I believe, it's more of a probability, because Bitcoin at any time can gain or lose $2,000, $3,000 in value, maybe even $4,000, as we see in some of these flash crashes. So it's likely to happen, but does it have to happen? No, it does not have to happen. And if you're going to use the CME gap as a trading tool, it's not a winning strategy. An analysis showed that if someone were to trade through these 100 gap weekends, if they were going to trade based off of these gaps, right, what they believe what would happen in the future, they would have been stopped out 53 out of 100 times, making this strategy a losing one, even though 95% of the time these gaps are filled. I hope that you found value in this video. If you disagree, I'd love to hear your comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.